Okay, we are right at the hour. Thanks for everyone for joining. We've got a great discussion starting planned. So I will turn things over to Greg to get everything kicked off.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I'm really excited. Seth is one of my favorite people. I've worked with him a number of times. He's phenomenal. Seth, thank you for coming. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a plug here, and then we'll just get straight to the meat of it, which is the really fun part. But just for context, Seth has done it all. He's been 25 plus years in customer-facing, customer value-adding roles. He's currently the head of customer experience, leading all of the customer experience at LearnUpon, which is a learning management company. He's done it at a number of cool companies and at a high level, including Lucid software, Instructure, eHarmony, more. Anyway, that's the context. This guy's built teams. He's done a phenomenal and I think extraordinarily thoughtful job at understanding what's kind of what the real opportunity here is, what the real work of driving value for customers. So I'm really thrilled to have a chance to kind of dig into that with one of the really careful and thoughtful people in the space, I think. And so thank you, Seth, for joining us.
Thanks for having us, or having me, Greg, us, me, myself, in plural, apparently.
Yes.
What Greg was saying in a very nice way is that I've made a lot of the mistakes and hopefully learned from some of them. And we can talk about that today.
Well, that's the only way. You know, I say the same thing all the time, Seth. I say, why should you listen to me? Because I've made every possible mistake, right? And it's kind of through that process that you start to really unpack things. So we're going to unpack some fun stuff today. And in fact,
and for you, my mistakes are free. For me, they weren't free. So let's benefit from that, shall we?
Exactly. I want to unpack something that actually I've wanted to talk about this a long time, but I needed the right discussion partner. And I think you're absolutely the right person.
Thank you.
To talk about this whole, in fact, one of the most common questions that I get is, hey, you know, Greg, the problem with our company is that we're too focused on a customer support, customer service mindset, and we haven't made the shift to a customer success mindset. It's a great idea. It's like you the second you hear it, you know it's true. You know there's power in this idea. But we really do need to kind of unpack what all of that means. What is a customer service mindset? What is it? What's success mindset? What does the shift mean? What's involved in making that shift? And the reason I wanted to do this with you is because that's exactly what I've seen you do multiple times. Now, you've done other things and we could talk about them, but I don't know anyone who's sort of taken that particular challenge, and it is a difficult challenge to make a transition like that and to do it well and thoughtfully and successfully, and just repeatedly figured out how to engineer that transition over to the success side. So anyway, with that's what I want to talk about. And I want to start by kind of let's define our terms a little bit. Let's understand what we mean by this. What is a customer service mindset? Like what are we talking about when we say we're too in the service of the support mindset?
Yeah. So in the first place, I should say that there's nothing inherently wrong with the quote unquote customer service or customer support mindset. It's appropriate for a lot of functions all the time, and for every function some of the time. The problem is when it's exclusively how you think, as you were saying. And it's also a terrible mindset for, say, a leader of a SaaS customer experience organization to have themselves personally. They probably lead a team or two that should live in that place, but if they themselves are operating in that place, it's going to be a problem. I'd say a few things. I'd say it is inherently reactive. That's its primary orientation, at least. I'd say it's anchored in the past, or at best the present. It doesn't think about what could be or what will be. It thinks about what is and was. I'd say it's focused mostly on solving problems. That's what it does for a living if you ask it, and when it's on truth serum. And then I'd say it's kind of transactionally oriented. It's focused on events and issues. And when we say that, we're saying things like features, bugs, outages, maintenance windows, releases, renewals, roadmaps, like inherently transactional things. And you know, as a result, it measures itself in response time. and in satisfaction scores. And that, if you think about it, aligns with everything I just said about the way that it thinks about itself and about the world and about customers. It says things about satisfying and even delighting customers and exceeding their expectations and all those nice sounding things. It talks about coverage and service levels. It's all about like incidents, tickets, transactions. Fundamentally, it exists to solve or close units of work. And it sees that its job will be done and it will cross this imaginary finish line when everything is finished, completed, closed, and done. That's the customer service mindset in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah, totally. Well, okay, but the way you lay it out there, all of those things sound really necessary. They sound like they're like, how would I live without it? Like you just made a list. I'm thinking, what would I discard from the list? And the answer is nothing. We need all that stuff. So then what's the problem? Why is that? Like you said, it's not a problem on its own. It's a problem when it becomes your primary or exclusive mindset. Right. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So my career is an interesting one where this question is concerned because I started in support. My first real job 25, 30 years ago was in support. And I've added other functions as I've gone along. And at the same time as that was happening in my own career, I think the general worldview of customer success, or what we now call customer success, was shifting. And probably customer success is a dedicated profession with a title is what, 12, 15 years old at most. So what is the problem with it? The problem is that it is not keeping pace with fundamental changes in the business model of a lot of the companies that we all work with and think about. Customer service model worked fantastic for install-based software. It's fantastically effective for sort of long-term service engagements, maybe. It's terrible for SaaS. It's terrible for renewed revenue-based businesses. And further to that, like if this customer success sort of job role is to be effective, if it's to fulfill its charter, it can't think like that. Support should think like that pretty much always. And that's why kind of support and success should be like the farmer and the cowboy should be friends, right? Like the success person and the support person should be friends, but they should think differently. Implementation's a weird hybrid of the two, and we can get into that. So again, the problem isn't that it exists. And I wouldn't even say for a customer success manager, you can completely get away from that mindset. You have to be aware of it and even live in it at times. It's when you build a house there and stay there and don't ever visit customer success land that it's a problem.
So in a sense, it's a teleological problem. It's a purpose problem. It's a difference in purpose, right? Yeah. So that gets at like the other big thing we have to define, I think, to really understand this, which is, well, if the customer service or support mindset is to address issues and to get them and to remove them, right? As almost like treating them like obstacles. We got to get rid of that thing. That doesn't tell you what destination you're headed to. That doesn't tell you why you're doing any of this, right? And so talk to me about the success mindset. And then I want to go back because I really liked your first description, your first breakdown of those sort of ways of operating under the support mindset. And we can contrast that with what are the ways of operating? What's the matching model, or modus operandi of the whole success side? So anyway.
Yeah, the customer success mindset, and I guess maybe the best way to do it is just what you were saying, and that's to make a point-by-point contrast or comparison between the two. I'd say by contrast with customer service, it is proactive and primarily forward-looking. It's focused on delivering outcomes or results that customers value. It is partnership-oriented. And when I say partnership, that's a dangerous thing to say because that term gets thrown around so loosely. If there's any term in our industry that's been abused just beyond reason in the last 10, 20 years, it's partnership. Everyone all of a sudden is your partner. Not really. So I'm talking about true bidirectional partnership. And thus, when you look at it, it behaves in a different way. Like it measures itself by its ability to get customers to measure themselves and to report back more than that to you what they're getting from what you're doing with them. it's about delivering like real quantifiable ROI for your customers and not being afraid of that whole conversation because you're worried about what you'll see if you open the door and peek inside, right? It's about a holistic view of your customer where, as we said, the service mindset is about what issues are they facing right now, what tickets are open, what incidents are they dealing with, what feature requests have they placed. It's not like it's unaware of those things, but it's thinking about them. It sees a forest and not a collection of trees, really. And then like this doneness or finishedness thing is a serious problem when it comes to the customer success mindset. You can't measure yourself that way. And for those of us that started in support, that's a horrifying thought, right? It's like, but I need to get the queue to zero. Like my inbox must be empty. Like, no, that's the wrong goal for the customer success mindset, because you should constantly be living in a place, if you are thinking like a customer success person, of imagining what the next conversation with each customer should be, not how do I finish the ones I'm having now. And I think that's the nub of the difference.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to break it down because I heard you say something that is a big deal for me. So they have completely different objectives, purpose, right? So the purpose on support is to solve, to address.
Yep.
Right. And its primary metric is, did we solve, and was it a good experience?
And how quickly did we solve, and how efficiently did we solve? So it gets a little more nuanced, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
But roughly, it's solving and doing so in a way that satisfies the customer.
Solve and satisfy. That's it. Yep.
On the other side, we have success, which is not satisfy, because we have a different objective, which is to produce results.
Yep.
And that's interesting, because here's one of the first conflicts as I see it. If satisfaction is or even a top priority or a top metric of value that you measure yourself by, you've already got a conflict, because now I'm facing a customer who, and I think it's important to understand that, look, we give all the same software and all the same services to all our customers, and yet they get wildly different results, all the way from nothing to phenomenal, right? But how do you explain that, right? If we're doing the same thing, and the answer is they're doing something different. So now I'm in the success mindset. The outcome is what matters. I have to face the fact that I have, in many cases, to confront customers that they're doing the wrong thing. And if satisfaction is an important metric, I'm going to hesitate to do that every time. And I've been there. Like, I think we've all been there to say, well, I mean, even in many cases, customers tell you they don't want you to do that. Yeah. Or they'll use body language. They'll send signals. Don't tell me what to do or how to do my business or other things. And in some cases, it's relevant how they're doing business, right? We can't just pretend it's just how they're using the software. It's how this folds into their overall way of driving results. And so now I've got this conflict. So one of the things we can't import, and this is really fundamental to me, we can't import from the service mindset, is actually one of its core things, which is good experience, satisfied experience, happy customer.
Happy customer,
now,
yeah, exactly.
I care about a happy customer, but if that's my number one metric, I'm gonna shy away from doing the things that drive results. In many cases, it's a
desirable byproduct. It's not
right.
The object of your activities.
Exactly right. So now there's an import that's a problem, right? And then the other one, well, there's so many, but another one I want to pick up on is this idea of doneness. I think that's brilliant. I have not heard it put that way, but I think that is absolutely brilliant, because that's another dimension of merit in which I can't get ever complete satisfaction for myself in the success role.
Yeah.
Because it's never done. If it's done, then the relationship's over. Like, if success is done, you think about it, then we're done with that's obviously not, that's not our goal. Our goal is to never be done with that customer. So this idea that I have to let go of, in a sense, the two pillars of value, two performance metrics that matter, and shift to a completely different mindset. That's hard.
That's all. What are you going to do? What are you going to do after lunch? Like, give up the two things that you've been told your whole career you have to build your life on, and then the rest is easy. Yeah, and you think, well, where does this come from? Why do people think and operate this way? Think about the average sort of career path of a person who becomes a customer-facing professional. Where do they start? They start in an environment where their work is inherently transactional and it comes to them. So one way to start is in contact center. And you sit down and you put on a headset and you plug in and you push available, and your customers are queued up and they march right into you, and you finish one and you do the thing and you leave them super happy and you press available, next one drops on you. Or they start in a hospitality environment where they're standing behind a cash register or at a help kiosk or something, and up walks customer number one, and they solve the problem, and that customer is smiling and happy and they produced great results, and they walk off and the next one's standing right there in line. And then they make at some point transition into our field, and they can point to these shiny credentials and years of experience making customers happy and dealing with customers. And we all look at that and say, ooh, that makes them a great hire. And it probably does, because that's part of the job. And then we turn them loose and we don't get the results we want. And we're like, well, what happened? Like, this person was so good. And you think, yes, but they were so good at a very, very different job. And that job was a job that came to them, not a job that they had to have any strategy or intentionality about. They don't know, genuinely, as early career professionals, what to do next. And you think, oh, like, that's on me. I didn't tell them so. I didn't think about the fact that they need to change to a mindset where, like, the object is not to be done. The object is to never be done, which is in many ways the exact opposite. And so I think it comes about quite organically and naturally. And it's just on us as leaders to teach people a different way of thinking about their work. Doneness is not the goal.
And this connects to something else you said, which really piqued my interest, which is the shift from being reactive to proactive.
Yeah.
Because if you just told me, like, if I came in, I'm that hire, right? And you just said, hey, you're never done in this job. That doesn't explain to me why that's the case. It doesn't explain to me what I will do instead.
Yeah.
Right. But when you brought up, well, you have to shift from a reactive to a proactive mode. Well, then that immediately begs the question, proactive about what? Preparing for what? Planning for what? Laying the groundwork for what? Right. Now, that's an interesting question. And if you if you break that down for me, I suddenly feel like maybe I have a chance to really grab onto this big idea.
So you mentioned a minute ago how customers get a little bit defensive when we start to move into the area where we know we need to be, and they will put their elbows out a little bit and kind of swing them around to keep you away. And they do it in different ways. Sometimes it's body language, like you said. Sometimes it's something very mundane, like they'll say, well, that's a nice conversation you want to have, but I just need to learn to use your software. So let's just get to the training part, okay? And we'll get to that other part later. And what they're doing is thwarting the essential element, the foundation stone of partnership in a real sense. I promised I'd come back to that, and I'm not going to let go of it. Like, partnership means knowing what your other organization needs to accomplish to be successful, and then behaving accordingly. So you say to a new person that you're talking about who's walking in, you need to say, until you know what your customer is trying to achieve, and I don't mean implementing our software, because that wasn't what they said when they decided to procure our software. They're like, as beautiful a myth as it is, it never happened that in a boardroom somewhere, some CEO said, you know what we need to do this year? We need to procure an awesome learning management system, preferably LearnUpon. Like, I'd love that if that was happening in boardrooms everywhere. It's not. Instead, they said something like, hey, we're opening a new office in Sydney, and we're hiring 100 people down there, and we need to replicate all the good things that we have already going in our office in Dublin and our office in Philadelphia or something. Like, how are we going to do that? And some smart person said, well, like, educating all those people as they come on board is important. And you know what? With COVID and with the fact that they're now on the other side of the world, we can't do it the way we've always done it in person. How are we going to go about this? Well, we need a learning management system. Okay, fantastic. Go find one. Until, as a new professional in this field, you understand that your job is to get to the root of why they brought you in the first place, and then determine what result they expected, and then determine still further, how are you going to measure that we're getting the result? Until you know that about your customer, you know nothing, and you're really a customer service person. And again, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, except it won't get you what you need if you're meant to be a customer success manager and grow a portfolio of business.
Incredible. And that shift isn't then only the contrast between reactive and proactive. It's also the contrast between a sort of tactical mindset and a strategic mindset. Strategic in the sense that there's a goal here. There's a long-term objective, or maybe it's short term. There's an objective, and it's business. It's defined in business terms. It's defined as an outcome and a benefit and results, right? And so I'm shifting from a tactical mindset, march down this road, to a strategic mindset. Go take that hill. Go achieve a victory. And you mentioned, man, two things that just I think, because what I'm interested in this conversation in particular is how people make this transition, and I love how you've been breaking that down. So one thing is just this idea that they can't even do this new job until they have a clear understanding of what that objective looks like. That's a hard one for a lot of people to adapt to. Like, that's new. Like, right? The first time I heard that, that's like, oh, that's a completely new job I have to do. I don't know exactly right now how I would do that. Like, would I just ask them, or what? Like, talk about that a little bit, because that's really interesting.
To start with, you have to get tactical about being strategic. And that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but I'll tell you what I mean by that. And I love strategy as the place we need to go, because everyone, and especially everyone in our field, I think it's endemic to who we are, like, comes out of school and says, you know what I want to do when I would grow up? I want to do strategy, whatever the heck that means, right? And we all have this nebulous idea that I someday want to spend most of my time on strategy. Well, okay, how do you do that? Let's get tactical about being strategic. One of the best things I've learned in business, two questions. One is why, and all the variations of why, and we'll come back to that. And the other one is, tell me more about that. Like, and honestly, today, if I had a brand new CSM walking in who'd never been a CSM, and I had 10 minutes to prepare them for their job, first, heaven help them. But second, like, I would tell them two things. I would say, get really good and very comfortable asking the question why, and all of its variations, like what would it mean if, etc. And get really good at saying, tell me more about that, with a sincere expression on your face. Tactically, that's the best two pieces of advice I can give you. Because then when you go to a customer and you say, all right, what are you trying to achieve with our software? And they're like, well, we're trying to, in the case of LearnUpon, we're trying to get people to complete courses. No, you're not. So, like, what are you really asking there? You need to ask, well, why? Why do you want them to complete courses? And the person will go, like, I've never been asked this question before. And they'll say, well, because they'll learn what's in the courses. Okay, cool. Like, what would it mean to you and your organization if people learned what's in those courses? And like, you can see the wheels start to turn a little bit. And then they'll say something inadequate, like, they'd know more about our software if they completed those courses, if they learned what was in those courses. And you say, cool, tell me more about that. And you just get them talking. And so for a new CSM, or for a manager of a new CSM, if you're going to give them one gift, give them the gift of those two questions. And then explain to them that in the big picture, they need to know what that company is trying to do with your software and what they expect to get out of it. You're essentially giving them a screwdriver and a hammer. And like, will it do everything that you need to do in the way of home repair? No, but I'd be hard pressed to identify two tools that can get a larger percentage of what needs to be done than a screwdriver and a hammer. Like, between those two things, if you get a little creative, you can do an awful lot. And that's where I'd start with a brand new CSM, getting tactical about being strategic.
That is fantastic. That was a terrific dialogue, because that's been my experience over and over again. I don't know, hundreds or maybe even thousands of times, to just say, hey, what's the business benefit, or what's the ultimate objective of this? And have them say, well, we got to get it installed. It's interesting, because what that tells me is the strategy that matters is their strategy. The business benefit is their business benefit. And so it's a little bit shocking, I think, to people who are new to this. It was to me, that the client doesn't know it right off the top of their head when you ask them.
Or at all.
That's shocking. Or at all, right?
Like,
right?
Here's the other thing I would tell someone. I would say, get comfortable in your own mind playing the game. What's the worst thing that could happen? Because so often in SaaS, the buyer buys, and then they're the decision maker, they're the stakeholder, they're the one that has any clue what the strategic outcome of the partnership is. And then they hand it off to a functionary on their team who, bless their heart, their job is to administer the LMS. Like, you ask them, like, what are we trying to do here? Well, we're trying to make the LMS successful. No, you're not. But do you know any better? Probably not. So you have to ask yourself, all right, what's the worst thing that can happen? And you say then to the customer, that's super helpful. Thank you. And I'm here to make you a hero in your organization. We're going to do everything we can to make this LMS successful. You know, I've got a few questions about what business result you're trying to get. And it feels to me like maybe both of us would benefit from having a conversation about this with your boss. And that's such a dangerous piece of ground to step on, you think, because the person could be like, you're not going over my head. What's going on? Really, will they? Probably not. Not if you frame it that way. Not if you say, look, my interest here is to make you wildly successful. I don't feel confident I can do that unless I know some things that I don't think you can tell me. What's the worst thing they can say? No. And then at least you know something, like you know that you don't know. And that's maybe the other tip we'd throw in just to get past that point. There's this Hippocratic oath of customer success that we need to get rid of. And it is, as a customer success manager, every time I talk to a customer, they must leave happier. No, like that's a terrible idea, but isn't it deeply entrenched? When we get off a call with a customer, don't we think, man, they were upset when the call ended, I failed. Like, no, probably not. If you ask the right questions and you push them on why, and you start to ask them to deliver tangible evidence of the results that you've both agreed you're seeking to get, they might leave a little uncomfortable sometimes, because what's going on in their head? They don't know the answer to your question and they hate that. But are they worse off as a result? No, they're better off. Like they're on the path to getting to a good place.
So you're already, the first thing, Seth, you've asked me to do as a new success manager, I've already confronted what I said before, which is the thing I want to do potentially does not make the customer happier.
Right.
Right. So like the first thing, so you immediately have to make that shift. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about this is, I think, as I was saying, most people don't realize how hard it is for customers to answer the question, what's the ultimate result you guys are trying to achieve?
Yep.
And we have this instinct. This thing is bad. I think we really need to root this out. I'm dedicated to rooting this out or dying trying, which is this idea that, hey, if the customer says that's what they care about, then that's what they care about. Who are we to question that, right? If they say they just want an LMS installed, what business do I have telling them that's the wrong answer? Well, obviously, people in CS are very diplomatic. Generally speaking, we don't say that's the wrong answer. Your dialogue was perfect because of course we have a better way to say that. But that is what we're saying. We're saying that's not enough. We need to go all the way to the end. And that's a shocker. So one thing I tell people, and this is part of helping people make this transition. One thing I say is, by the way, I love your two first questions. That is incredibly brilliant. I'm totally going to rip that off. That's fantastic. One of the things that I say is, you have my permission, right, to challenge the customer. You have my permission to assume that they might not give you the full right answer that's effective for you to produce the value they need. So you have permission to go digging. And it's like the corollary to your get comfortable with being a little uncomfortable. That's actually because you are responsible for this, right? So it's a kind of responsibility. Okay, another thing I want to say though, which is really interesting, because in a way we're going to go around backwards, and this is fun for me. So we talk about, I love how you broke down the support and the service mindset, and it's all about getting things done and solving, and it's all legit in that context, et cetera, right? One of the things that's fascinating though, I worked with a company that had really studied its support calls, because they noticed something really fascinating, which, and this does tie in, bear with me. They'd noticed that some support calls and reps had a lot more follow-up calls because the issue wasn't fully resolved. Was it right? And so it isn't just close the ticket. Hopefully that means the issue's resolved, but it doesn't always. And it's like, if they come back, right? And they were studying that, and they were noticing that was a pattern. And it turned out it was one of their bigger, I think it might've been their biggest opportunity to reduce the overload on their support resources. So they were looking at them carefully, and they were even listening like to the recordings. And one of the things they discovered, this is fascinating to me, is that what kind of question the support rep asked turned out to be really important, in fact, pivotal. So the standard one was, what's the problem? And here's the solution. And they might be right or they might be wrong, and they just kind of comfortable with that. But the effective support reps had some version of the following question. And it was something like, before I answer, first, you need to tell me, what were you trying to achieve when you ran into that problem?
And what happened when you tried? Like that's
Yeah.
the right way to approach a support interaction. Yep.
So you tell me, well, this thing broke and it sent me to a blank page. Well, I could say, oh, that's because of this. But then when you tell me, well, I was actually trying to run this report, my answer might be, you're on the wrong page to begin
Exactly.
with.
Right? Classic thing a couple of jobs ago, one of our most common kinds of tickets is I can't log in. And we don't see that in our current one because we have a different support model, but that was like 20% of our tickets or something. And more than half the time on those, they were trying to log into the wrong place. Like we were a typical SaaS application that had whatever.oursolution.com. And they were trying to log into the wrong one because instead of going to the page that their employer had bookmarked or whatever, they would Google, such and such login, and they get taken to our generic site, our free for new people site, and they try to log in there. And yeah, we could try to solve the problem that they can't log into that site all day long. It's the wrong problem. And you're not going to know which problem you're really solving until you ask exactly the question you put forward, which is, what were you trying to do? Like, tell me what you were trying to accomplish here, and we'll get where we need to go faster. But instead, the knee-jerk reaction and the corollary to what we're talking about today in support is, what browser are you using? Like, let's start there. Such a wrong place to start, but you'll never know it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I love this because this is actually, again, it's getting at the thing I'm really interested in this conversation, which is, how does this transition occur between the support mindset and the success mindset?
Yeah.
And I actually think one of the bridges is to start improving the support mindset itself, to have at least one layer of forward-lookingness, like, what's the outcome? What's the expectation that you have when you're doing this? Because we may be in completely the wrong place. Well, when they implemented that, they call it the golden question. When they implemented that, the number of follow-up tickets and follow-up calls went way down. They were able to address it much more effectively on first. So then I can take someone, right, who's had that kind of training, and I can say, okay, now in success, you're doing that, but you're looking all the way forward, not just to what they were doing at that moment or that day. We're looking for what's the whole business trying to achieve. And of course, it's important because there are all sorts of things. And this is possibly a layer of that transition in mindset that's so important. There are things that they're doing that aren't even in the software that are important. Okay, so there are things that's like, you need to do this differently, set up your LMS differently or whatever. But do you even have the training content? Have you guys thought through the order of what skills are most important for your new Sydney team or whatever? So the point is, this is where, looking ahead ultimately also broadens my view. Instead of focusing just on the software, now I'm looking at, what are all the things they're doing that are relevant to this?
You've alluded to another problem a couple of times, and it's this idea of staying in your lane, right? Where we have it deeply ingrained in us as humans, hey, stay in your lane. And you mentioned this before when you said, well, what business is it of mine? What they're trying to, you have to make it your business. Like, there's an interesting connection here to our engagement survey, our employee engagement survey, which we conduct a couple of times a year. And I think most businesses do. And further, I think they all ask the same question. So I'm hoping that most members of the audience will say, oh yeah, we asked that question too. And the question is essentially about work-life balance. But the way it's usually phrased is, at the end of the day, I'm able to disconnect. And chronically, what I've seen is that customer success managers are the lowest, or darn near the lowest, in the whole company on that front. And why is it? It's because their work does not lend itself to doneness. And as long in your career as you are fighting against that, which is a new inductee to the world of customer success, you're going to be miserable because you think you should have everything done. And it's only when things are done that you can disconnect. You reach a good point in your life as a customer success manager when you can disconnect despite the fact that nothing is done, and despite the fact that really you started 10 more conversations today than you closed. And that's the difference between a happy CSM and an unhappy one over the long haul, that they can say, yeah, despite the fact that my stuff isn't done, because doneness isn't a thing in my world, I still am able to disconnect because I know when it's time to be thinking about other things, and I can come right back in the morning and I can pick up that thread. But early career CSMs suffer from that chronically, and it's very real. I'm not saying they're mistaken and they shouldn't feel that way. They do feel that way because they don't understand the rules of the game they're playing, and it's a totally different game. It's checkers to chess, and not in the sense of complication. I'm just using that example to say it's very different, even though it might look similar in some ways. It's played on the same board.
I feel like just you saying this is a completely different game helps. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't sell you what the new game is, but it allows me to let go a little bit of some of the core. Okay, so now I want to get to kind of a juicy part of this because I've seen you do this. I know you're extraordinarily effective at something which is probably the hardest of all these things. So clearly you understand this shift. How do you put it into practice when you take over a team,
Yeah.
that's got a service or support mindset? What's your plan of action, your plan of attack?
You send the strongest message as a leader in any function, in any organization, with what you choose to measure and how you choose to incentivize performance. So if you come into an organization that is deeply rooted in a customer service mindset, look first at their metrics. If you look at the metrics and what they're measuring is completion and satisfaction and efficacy, and you don't change that, you're going to keep right on doing that. You can say whatever you want in team meetings and one-on-ones with people. You can harangue and wave your arms. You can get on stage at kickoff meetings annually. You can say all those things. As long as you keep measuring what you've always been measuring and keep incentivizing what you've always been incentivizing, you're going to get the same results. If instead you come into a new team where they've been measuring, NPS is a hobby horse of mine. Let's not go down that road today. We haven't got time in the world. NPS or CSAT or greenness of your health score, that's another whole thing, but we won't go there. But if you've had those things and you've said, let's think about ratios, let's think about average time to completion on these things. If you don't rip that out of the wall right away and say, that's not what we're measuring here, and install something that is better aligned with the idea of customer success, whatever that looks like in your organization, you're not going to change. And if you do that, by contrast, first thing, everything will change because people are hardwired to look at how they're measured and how they're rewarded for the outcomes of those measurements. So then the rewards is another point where you could make a very practical difference in a very short period of time. And, instead of like commonly for CSMs, I suppose you're giving them a small percentage commission or something on upsells. It's not bad in and of itself. You want upsells, but there's a better way to look at it. And we won't go into that in detail today, but like there's a different way to structure your incentives that show people that you're serious. You've got to put your measurement and your money where your mouth is, or you won't catalyze the change.
Amazing. Couldn't agree more. And here's challenge number one. What does it come with? Well, it comes with the need to get other leadership on board with that change. If it's not just an internal decision, your CEO probably thinks of that as the best metric. So you've got to go to bat and make a compelling case for a new thought process, which, as hard as that can be, if you're new, right? If you're making this change, even if you've been there a while, as a major theme, you have bought an opportunity to explain, right? You've bought an opportunity. You've got a moment there where you can say, here's why that matters. And what you just said is more or less what I would want to say in that situation. If we measure this, if we keep measuring the same thing, we'll keep getting the same thing, right? Something like that.
Yep.
Really powerful.
And actually CEOs and CFOs in particular are wired to appreciate what we're talking about here. Because you can say, let's just take the CFO as an example. You can say, look, you're signing off on spend in the end. What do you expect from Salesforce, from our HRIS? What are you expecting from that? And they're like, and they have some expectations. Maybe they haven't laid them out in writing anywhere, but they've got them. And you can say, here's my problem. All of our customers have a you in their organization. And you're a nice person, and I like you, but you're not my friend when you belong to another organization, unless I've got a great way of talking to you and the people who report to you about the value that we're literally creating in your organization. Because look at the current climate. Everybody right now is examining their stack, and they're doing away completely with anything that's obviously superfluous. And then they're carving down what seems to be essential to the bare minimum. And they are looking at themselves and saying, I am being a responsible business leader. This is what I have to do. Well, guess what? Every one of your customers is doing the same thing. And if you're proud of yourself for being cautious and careful and prudent, you can't but be happy for them, right? Unless you get the pointy end of the stick. Well, how do you avoid the pointy end of the stick? So as you're going to your CFO or your CEO and you're making a pitch and you're saying, look, all I'm proposing to you is that we take our customer success team and we turn them into a tool that teaches the people they work with in customer organizations how to talk to you, frankly, and how to say to you, we're not going to cut this solution, or we shouldn't. We're not going to downgrade it, because if we do, here's the trade-off. We get intangible business results. Not like, oh, our customers will be less happy if we're not using LearnUpon. Who cares? Not the CFO, not right now. But if you say instead, okay, like if we did away with this tool, we can't not train our customers. So I've got to go back to the way I used to do it, which is to send people out on the road or get them on Zoom calls. And that's not scalable. That's not replicable. Quality will fall down because consistency is fantastic when you deliver training through an LMS. And efficiency cannot help but go down. And so in the end, and then not very far down the road, we're going to be paying more to accomplish what we're doing. Can I say right now that all my customers are ready to go talk to their CFOs and say that? I can't, but my CS team is working darn hard to make that sure. So, and we're doing it with what you've taught us about result strategy documents, and just having those conversations with people that say, what are the rules of the game here? What game are we playing? Like, what's the winning outcome here? And are we measuring that? If so, how? And no, really, show me that you're measuring it. It's nice that you say that's how you would measure it, but are you? Well, no, because it's hard. Well, where can you start now, right? And so a CFO or a CEO is very susceptible to this argument, because it's how they are running their own business. And they can think about their colleagues who are running the other businesses that are our customers. And it's not hard for them to imagine how they're thinking too. And all I'm proposing in moving to a customer success mindset is setting my team up to train the people they work with to make those people happy and to see that they're getting what they need and want from this solution.
And I think what you're getting at really addresses the question you set up a minute ago, which is, well, you got to rip out the metrics that don't align with the purpose that we have in success. Well, that doesn't answer the question. Then what are the metrics? And there's no way we have time now. But what are you going at? Well, it's obvious. They're as close as we can possibly get to what the ultimate business outcome is for the customer. If we can measure that, fine. If we can measure proxy for that, great. But we have to figure out what we're measuring ourselves is on achievement of the business benefits that they expected to get. And if we don't have anything like that, this is why I like to argue that people, every company you talk to says they're customer centric. Everybody says that, right? Oh, of course. Are you customer centric?
I want to meet the company that says they're not. I honestly would love to talk to the company that says, actually, we're not. We're not. Yeah. Whatever else centric. And you're like, really? This is refreshing. Because everybody says it, right?
It's like when you ask people if they have a sense of humor. Of course I have a sense of humor, right?
Right,
So
or even better, what style of learner are you? If you ask people this, everybody who has an opinion says, I'm a visual learner. Okay, there must not be any other kind, evidently. And my master's degree in instructional technology says that's baloney. But everyone who says it says they're a visual learner. So yes, everybody's customer centric. And
so everyone's customer centric. But my thing is, okay, what's the evidence that you are? And it goes straight back to what you said. What you measure tells me what you are.
Right.
Or what you care about. So if you're measuring, and my argument is satisfaction isn't a measure of their success. That's a measure of how they feel about us. I'm asking them, how do you feel about me? And pretending that that's me being interested in them. It's just the opposite. If I say, well, it's retention. No, that's the benefit we get, right? The question is, what justified their retention? What's the benefit for them?
Gosh,
right? You're not customer centric, in my opinion, if you're not measuring customer results.
You want to know a great way to check this quickly? Drop in on any random QBR that a customer success team is doing with their customers and look at their first 3 slides. If their first 3 slides are number of logins to our tool, growth in license count, and I don't know, some other utilization metric, they're not customer centric. If that's where you're starting your QBR, I don't care what you say, it's a lie. And I say this with a little guilt in my heart, because I'm sure that if I went and checked some of my own QBR decks right now, I'd be leading those. Why? Because it's easy to make a graph. That's why we do it. Don't kid yourself. That's why we do it. It's easy for me as 2 days before the QBR, oh crap, what am I going to put in here? I can make a pretty graph out of that. And usually it's up and to the right. And you're like, hey, customer, look, lots of logins. And they're like, that just means a bigger bill for me. Why are you telling me this? If instead the first 3 slides are, you said to us a lot of things when we started with you a year or 2 ago or whatever. One thing I heard the most is that you care about this. Based on our conversation since, I think we've taken this from A to B. And I think that's having a business impact for you. Do you agree? And does your measurement align with this? And what else can we be measuring to show more of the same? If that's in your first 3 slides, even if you haven't got the data to make a pretty graph, okay, maybe you're customer centric, like you're at least starting. But yeah, the QBR litmus test is hilarious because, and I can't not look at this now when I get QBR decks from the companies that we have contracts with, and they're coming to us and presenting our QBR, and I have half an hour or an hour in the calendar with them. If their first slide is logins, I'm multitasking. Like I hate to be that guy, but I am like, okay, you're done, and I just go do something else.
You're the nicest guy I meet, because in my case, in my experience, the client owner will stop coming to those meetings.
Yeah,
they're not for him or her. They're for someone else. They're for the admin. They're for the project manager.
Not even really for them, if we're honest. But yeah, it's right? More for them. And you say to yourself, like, why aren't stakeholders attending my QBRs? It's like, well, are you earning it? Are you telling them anything they want to know? No, you're not. Look at your deck. Like, what part of this do they care about? None of it. So
yeah, that's why I say if they're not coming, it's because you're not doing it for them. Yeah. And actually, by the way, if it was just for them and that was your focus, there's a decent chance it would be a much shorter meeting as well, because a lot of that other stuff, if it's needed at all, which as you pointed out, it might not be, it's probably for someone else and you could do it in a different meeting. So we strongly recommend doing a brief, we just call them EBRs, make it punchy, focus on their results, make sure you're aligned. Is this still what matters to you? Are we still focused on the right thing? You get so much value out of that. And then they get to do the other thing that you said, which is, let's talk about what's next. Right?
And that's can we hold ourselves to rules? Like, can we say a good EBR should be no longer than 3 slides long, and no slide in the deck is allowed to have more than 20 words on it? Like, play that game sometime in your organization and see what happens. Can you make an EBR 3 slides long with a total of 60 words across those 3 slides? And the answer is you can. And if you can't, you're not doing it right. And I'm not saying you should do that every time. Like, people expect certain niceties in EBRs, and that's fine. But if you can't write the core, at least, of the first 3 slides with 60 words or less, you don't know them well enough, and you're not doing the right things.
Preach. So powerful. So powerful. Well, we have a minute, and I actually am interested if anyone it wants to ask a question. Are there any, out of all this conversation, was there anything that struck any of you that's relevant, or that you've chewed on, or that you have ideas and suggestions for? We'd be very interested to hear it.
Yeah, sorry for jumping in here. We have a few questions popped up. So the one that we'd start with is, someone asking, how would you speak with, owners of a process, speaking with like a CFO at the side of the business versus like the champion that you're working with? What are your thoughts on the approach of working directly with, executive teams or the CFO that owns the budget versus working with potentially your championing and enabling that quarterback or champion to own the conversation? My
thought is you're rarely going to get that opportunity. And unless there are a few of our customers, we are literally the platform on which they deliver their business. Their business is making and selling training. So the LMS for them is like AWS for us as a SaaS company. And there, I can probably talk to the CFO. Otherwise, you're rarely going to get that. So I think you're wasting your time thinking about how you would approach that person directly, because you'll never get the chance. I think instead, you should be focusing on how to train the people you do get to talk to that person. And pretty explicitly too, like by saying, our most successful customers have conversations with their CFOs, with their C-suite, about the value that their learning programs are creating. Let me give you some insights into how our most successful customers have done that, and then let's spend a few minutes framing that for you in your learning program. That's how my people would say it about our product. But you'll be able to transpose that into the key of whatever product it is you represent. And then if by chance you do happen to get in front of that CFO, you just do what you've been trying to teach your direct stakeholders to do. But even a relatively small business like ours, we did an audit recently. I think we have 71 SaaS applications that we use in our business. If our CFO went to any QBR for any of them at any point, that's all he'd do for a living. And he has a few other things he has to do. So rarely are you going to get that kind of attention, and it's probably not the right question to try to answer for yourself.
I think it's a really good point. And I would just add, that's why your 3 slides have to be what they are, because almost invariably what will happen is they'll just show those up the chain. That's what they'll show the CFO, and if they've heard you speak to it, they'll know how to speak to it. So in a sense, just doing your EBRs right is how you train them to do that. It's a brilliant answer, though.
I'll say one other thing that might be perceived as a swipe towards CFOs. It is definitely not. I love CFOs, but we've adopted a couple of kids, my family and I, and they come from trauma backgrounds. And one of the things we were trained to do as parents of these kiddos is mantras. And mantras are less than 10 words and repeated a lot. You should make these the core of your EBR, QBR, whatever you want to call it. So, for instance, for my team, it might be something like learning programs drive business results. And you say that 5 times in the half hour you have with your stakeholders. What are they going to say when they talk to their CFO next? Hey, our learning program is driving business results. And he'll be like, yeah, prove it. And you'll say, well, here are these 3 slides that show how they're driving our business results. You teach people 2 or 3 things like that, they become powerful advocates for you without wanting to do that. Because again, they owe you nothing. Why would they advocate for you? Because it's doing good things for them. You have to teach them what it's doing for them and tell them how to talk about it in very, very simple terms.
Brilliant. Can't add anything to that. Matt, what else?
Yeah, we've got a few more questions popping in. This is great. So one question is, how would you help others in your organization move from thinking about utilization and ARR to thinking about client business outcomes and results instead?
By teaching them that what you care about, which is utilization and ARR, follows client business results and only will follow from that. So we're going through this exercise with our customers, some of them called logic chains or logic bridges. And the exercise is this. You say, your learning program is intended to do this, and the business result is this. There's a yawning gulf between those 2 things. Let's build one peer at a time, a logic bridge from A to B. So to answer the direct question, you say, all right, we want better ARR. Our customer success team works hard, we get better ARR. There's a yawning gulf between those 2. Let's build the logic bridge. So our customer success team does what? Like if they talk to our customers, okay, that's a good start. Like if they talk to our customers, we're still not all the way over to we get better ARR. Let's take one more step. If when they talk to customers, they discover their business priorities, okay, we're still not there. If in discovering their business priorities, they teach customers to measure their success with our product, okay, we're almost there. It's probably one more leak in the chain. Then what? Then they have the opportunity to show real ROI. If we show real ROI to our customers, then we get the ARR we want. So here's the logic bridge. And you've got to say to decision makers in your organization, we can hope to get better ARR, and we can tell our CSMs ad nauseum that that's their job. They don't know how to do that. What do they know how to do? They know how to talk to customers. When they talk to customers, they know how to ask for business objectives. When they ask for business objectives, they know how to teach them how to measure it. When they're getting measured results, they know how to package that up and present it to a financial stakeholder, a decision maker. That I can tell people to do. I can't tell people drive more ARR. Like, what does a CSM do with that? They're like, okay, I will. It's like going to your team in football and saying, you know what you need to do? Win. Well, I'll be more specific. Score more points. And they're like, okay, like I know that's the object of the game. Like you can't do that. You've got to tell them how to score more points. And ideally, if you're a smart leader, how to score more points against the particular defense that this opposing team is playing. So the difference between go get more ARR and the tactical things I talked about that can be strategic in nature if you put them together is the essence of how you solve that problem in your work.
Totally brilliant way to describe it. I've never heard it described that way, but my simple version has been, we got to be careful measuring people only on ARR or retention rate or something like that. They're important, but if that's all it is, what I haven't done is to connect that outcome to the things they actually do on a daily basis that lead to that, right? And so I think you're just opening the space up to see that there's a process, and that process isn't widely variant. I don't need a bunch of stallions running around figuring out how to do it each new time. The fact is that the process you described, or some version of it, is the process of success. And we can learn and master that. So this is almost like the final point of, well, I'm sure there's more, but it's a major point in your how do you convert from a support mindset to a success mindset. Build out the success process so that they can see all the steps, and then they know what they do, what they actually do for a living, right? And I think that's really powerful.
like if you can't tell people how to do something better, you shouldn't be telling them how to do it. So can you tell someone how to ARR? No. Like, how do you ARR better? Like, doesn't make any sense. Like, you have to have, as a leader, a theory on the things that drive ARR. Because how do I have discovery conversations with customers better? That's an answerable question. So I think what they want, and this is coming back to the question, the person's question. It's not a wrong thing that these stakeholders are saying. Like, yes, customer success exists to drive more ARR, but I always talk about management or leaders as the clutch between the engine that is the executive team and the drivetrain that is their team. Sometimes, as the clutch, as the leader, you fully engage and translate exactly what they're saying in terms of force and speed into your team. Sometimes that's important. Usually you're disengaged or like partially engaged, and you're taking some of that yourself, translating it into something appropriate by shifting to a lower gear in the transmission that is you, and then passing that along to your team. If you're all on or all off all the time, you're going to tear yourself apart, or you're going to disappoint the engine. If you are deft about how to engage and disengage and how to translate things into a different gear for your team, that's when you're a good leader.
Nice. I think we have time for one more. Matt, what else have you got?
Yeah, we've got a few more that are all similar tread that we can end with this, which is around scaling the strategic side of this. So one of the questions is how do you scale this in a one-to-many rather than like a one-to-one CSM to client assignment? Others are around how do you scale the strategy side of QBRs, DBRs rather than just a checklist. So maybe we could talk about scaling, focusing on the results side and the strategic side of the customer success.
Oh, one-to-many. Yeah. One-to-many is so important. And it's one of the first things I built when I came into this position. And it's what I would do the same thing, moving into any organization that doesn't already have it, because you've got to do it. You can't do it the same way in one-to-many as you do in strategic. It comes down to distilling everything you would do in a strategic or enterprise model, a named model anyway, down to the 2 or 3 things that matter most, and then trying to find the right way to pass on the most important parts of that to your scaled model, pooled model customers. So for instance, in our environment, we've decided that it's really important to ask for customers to think about the question, what am I trying to do with your software? What business result is my learning program trying to drive, is how we're putting it. And you don't get to sit down and have an hour-long conversation with each of the 600 or something customers that these 4 scaled CSMs are doing. You don't get to do that, but you can at least plant the seed with them. And you can leave an option for customers that want to engage with that question to reach out to you and have that conversation, because some will, and you should make that time. It is well worth your time. But you got to do it at the right time in the customer life cycle. So I think it's well worth investing the time in your earliest customers in the pooled model. So you say you can't have this conversation with every one of your scaled customers. That's probably true. But how many of those are in their first year? Okay, now maybe we're working down to a number where it's more reasonable. And you could invest that time with that 120 customers or whatever over the course of a year. That means 10 a month. Can you do 10 a month? You can do 10 a month, I promise. And it's going to have a disproportionately positive impact to have that conversation with them versus someone that's been around and renewed a few times on your software. And even if they're not thinking about it right, they're thinking about it in a way that's leading them to renew. So as the pragmatist in the room, you've got to go for the ones that haven't yet demonstrated that pattern of behavior anyway.
That's incredible. And one of the reasons that works so well is that you're admitting something, which is almost another thing, that it's a mindset thing. And maybe I'll just end with this because we're out of time. But that mindset thing is not all customers are the same. Not all customers are in the same position. So we have this idealized view of customer success as being this thing that's blanketed on all our customers evenly. But the reality is customer success exists to make customers successful. And if they're already successful, they need less of it. And if they aren't yet successful, they need more of it. So in a pooled model or in a one-to-one model, we have permission to segment them into groups based on the opportunity for them to benefit. And that's why one reason I like your approach better than others is that it's not just based on everybody gets the same email, everyone's tech touch. No, it's hybrid. For one thing, let's prioritize needs and opportunities. For another thing, let's do the other thing you said, which is Let's be responsive when people raise their hand and show that they have a need or an interest. That's why we have people doing this job. That's why this will never be a robot-driven job. That's why I love customer success. Well,
triage. It's just triage, and we've all got to do it. Yep.
Yep. Well, we're out of time. I can't believe it went so fast. I think everyone here should see why I love talking to Seth. Such a deep thinker, so many interesting takeaways. I've got so many new phrases that you've lent me. I appreciate that. Always a pleasure, and hopefully we'll do it again.
Thanks, Greg. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Best of luck. Thanks everybody for coming. See you on the next one.
Thanks.